I'm Betty Hancock, co-chair of the Criminal Justice Task Force for Rochester, ACTS, that's Alliance of Communities Transforming Societies here in Rochester, New York. I'd like to welcome you to this forum for the Future Police Accountability Board in the city of Rochester, New York. For quite some time now, several grassroots organizations of Rochester have been working diligently to address systemic social issues in our community. Specifically, excessive use of force by some Rochester police officers. We believe the establishment of a police accountability board is an essential part of the solution. Rochester has a proven record of innovation. The first calculating machine was created in this city. The first breakfast cereal was developed and eaten here. We can thank a Rochesterian for the mechanical voting machine. Rochester had the first dentist chair, and naturally, it had the first gold tooth. And famously, the first digital and Kodak camera can call Rochester home. This list goes on and on. So I asked, why then would Rochester not become the first city to have a police accountability board with the power to discipline officers? The system we propose will have a dynamic partnership between the police chief and the police accountability board to ensure transparency and consistency in the process.
That's fine, just leave it.
In addition to the power to discipline, it would be an independent agent of the city, independent of the Rochester Police Department. It would have independent investigative authority, subpoena power, and it would access and review Rochester Police Department policy and procedures and recommend needed changes. We feel this is an excellent opportunity to continue the spirit of innovation and collaboration among Rochesterians. To hear firsthand why this is necessary and important, Sean Gordon and Jacinia Edgeston will tell you their personal experiences with the Rochester Police Department. While they make their way to the podium, we look forward to your input and participation in tonight's forum. Your experiences, feedback, and engagement will help make this vision a reality.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sean Gordon, and I'm first a human, and then I'm also the chairman of the Black Panther Party in Rochester, New York, and a member of EIE, and working to make the community a better place. But this journey starts here with my story. In November of 2016, I was walking with my friend Darryl Appleberry, and I was actually near his house. We lived across the street from each other, and the police department must have had a call or something. I don't know what's the reason why they were coming down the block, but when I left my house and was speaking to Darryl, then they rolled up on us and jumped out their vehicle. And the police mistook Darryl for another person that they wanted to arrest. So I heard that they're looking for this wanted person, and they arrested Darryl Appleberry immediately as they got out of the car. So although Darryl provided his correct identification, the police handcuffed him. So at that point, I had my phone, and I just took out my phone and started recording right away and letting the officers know that he has the right not to speak to them, and he has the right to, to be silent. And the police officers continued to walk into the vehicle. So I video recorded the entire incident along with Darryl's family, who repeatedly told the officers who Darryl was. So after they put him in the back of the police car, the police turned and chased me because I had been video recorded. So the officers didn't know who was who, and they were trying to direct me to go to a house that wasn't even my own house. So I was trying to explain to them that, you know, that they're doing something wrong, but they wouldn't listen to me. And here they have this man who is not the person that they're looking for, and they have him in cuffs already, telling him that he's under arrest and he's going to be taken down to the police station. So the officers tried to tase me, then tackled me, punched me, pepper sprayed me, and then arrested me. So leaving with Darrell Appleberry, all of a sudden this officer decides that he's going to jump out his vehicle and attack me. So he attacks me. Long story short, he changes his mind right there and says, you know what, thank you, Mr. Appleberry, I got somebody else. Have a nice day. And didn't bring him to the station or anything, just took me instead. So when I made a complaint to the Internal Affairs Department, nothing was done. In fact, police officers continued to harass Darrell and myself after this happened. So technically what happened is, when we went to PSI to make this complaint, I was still a walking individual. So all the way from PSI, I was followed by officers, and they continued to like harass me in my area where I lived. So that's when I really knew that, you know, even when they know they're wrong, you're trying to go about it peacefully, you have no protection unless we do something here to make a statement to let them know, like, you know, we're human beings, and we all, if we feel like we have a complaint, we want that complaint to be listened to, and we need voices that are going to carry this complaint. Right. So there is no question in my mind that this was an example of racial profiling and police brutality. Black people are a nation recovering from genocide, living in communities that are still poverty-stricken. I have no faith in the criminal justice system of our country, having been convicted at a trial by a jury that was not my peers, with the assistance of a judge who did not protect my rights and my truth. So no matter how much I fought, no matter how much I studied in the law books, no matter what measure I took to let them understand that this incident happened by the officers making a wrong move by arresting someone that was not the person with the warrant, then, because I'm taking the initiative to record, arrests me because they feel like they don't want this on camera. So even though we have the right to record, a lot of us are still going through a lot just recording a bad incident. So we are seen as statistics, and our freedom are trampled upon every day. So the police and the government are supposed to protect and serve. I want to see police accountability in Rochester, and that's a main reason why we're here today. So that my sons do not have to go through the same treatment that has brought me to tears many nights since it happened. So this is a great struggle for me, because I do have 2 children here in Rochester. My sons are born here in Rochester, and I had to leave my family, leave Jamaica, and redirect myself to live in this city. And when I got to this city, this is what happened to me. All I did was trying to go outside to, really, it was me and my wife going outside, and I seen Darrell, and I was just telling him hi, and my wife was waiting on the sidewalk waiting for me to come back to finish our morning walk. And this changed my whole future. So they will break down your family and rip everything that you built apart just by their own mistakes and not care. So I hope we can truly see some kind of improvement from this. Thank you for listening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jasenia Edgiston. I'm Ronnie Edgiston's wife. On February 11, 2017, I had been ill for weeks when my husband left to get me some ginger ale and Pepto-Bismol to try and calm my stomach. On this night, my husband got stopped by Rochester Police Department and eventually got badly beaten to the point that his eye socket was broken and his ribs were badly fractured. I didn't find out about this until 4 a.m. the next day. This is my husband. Due to this assault of my husband by Officer Thomas Kirk, I have faced many challenges, such as PTSD, anxiety, and the lack of support for our children, financially and emotionally. The lack of justice and equality has damaged so many lives through the years. True change is desperately needed. If we cannot now end our differences, then we have yet to learn empathy. For it requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. A profound purpose larger than the self-kind of understanding. We must never be fearful about what we are doing when it is right. My story is just one example of how survivors aren't the only ones harmed by police brutality. Wives, girlfriends, significant others, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, children. These are our children who are present here today as well. We all are affected by these actions in our community. Due to all of this, it is imperative that Rochester pass a police accountability board against the brutality that we are experiencing here in our community. And this needed to happen yesterday. Thank you.
Hello again, and I was really depending on the PowerPoint. We don't have anymore. But the issue of the use of excessive force, especially as it pertains to people of color, has been a long-standing issue in Rochester. About 50 plus years ago, Reverend Raymond L. Graves, along with Reverend Franklin Florence, and other clergy in the city advocated for civilian police review because people of color were being targeted on a regular basis. And sadly, some were also killed during the course of conflicts with the Rochester Police Department. Key organizations have been instrumental in the current campaign for police accountability. United Christian Leadership Ministries, chaired by Reverend Louis Stewart. And we appreciate all of the leadership from every person who has supported the Police Accountability Board. The Coalition for Police Reform, which was established in 2014 through the Campaign for Police Accountability and its community safety agenda. Enough is Enough, chairs Barbara Lackaware and Ted Forsythe, who after the beating of Benny Ward said, truly, enough is enough, and began to do research on the history of brutality in Rochester. Rock Acts, organizer John Greenbaum, and co-chairs, other people in the community. We spearheaded a card campaign in conjunction with the Delta Sigma Theta sorority and held a community forum at East High School in August of 2017 last year. The Police Accountability Board Organizing Committee was a combination of all of these organizations. We met on a regular basis to hash out what the Police Accountability Board would look like, what the ordinance would look like, and what we thought would be sufficient and having City Council support the issue. We are now the Police Accountability Board Alliance, which Barbara Lackaware will speak to later. From 2002 to 2015, only 2% of civilian complaints of unnecessary force have been sustained by the Chief of Police. So Sean's complaint was not sustained. Only 5% by the Civilian Review Board. So Jacinda's husband's complaint was not sustained. From 2008 to 2013, the Rochester Police Department Professional Standards Section, or the Internal Affairs Department, did not sustain any civilian complaints for unnecessary use of force. During the 14 years of reviewed data, the harshest penalties handed out for excessive use of force was 6 suspensions. Therefore, the case for independent police accountability system was recommended to the City Council. Currently, if a citizen has a complaint, they register the complaint with Rochester Police Department's Internal Affairs Office of Professional Standards Section, which then investigates these complaints. Their investigations and their findings are then submitted to the Civilian Review Board and the Chief of Police. And then the Civilian Review Board, though, has no power to discipline office. The Chief of Police makes the decision whether the complaint is sustained, and if so, what discipline is administered. Possible findings in complaint allegations against Rochester Police Department officers include exonerated, which means the Civilian Review Board's report says the RPD personnel's conduct was justified, lawful and proper. The PSS reports that the conduct was lawful, justified, and proper. And the Rochester Police Department website says that the police officer or officers involved acted properly and will not be disciplined. If there's a charge, if it's sustained, the Citizen Review Board reports the act occurred and the act amounts to misconduct or misjudgment. The Internal Affairs says the conduct occurred and amounted to misconduct or misjudgment. And the RPD website says your complaint has been supported. The officer involved acted improperly and may be disciplined. If it's unprovable, the Civilian Review Board says there is insufficient evidence to prove or disprove an allegation. The Internal Affairs says there's insufficient evidence to prove or disprove an allegation. And the RPD website says there was not enough evidence to prove your complaint true or false, so no further action will be taken. And lastly, if they come back unfounded, the Civilian Review Board reports, the state reports that the act complained of apparently did not occur. The Internal Affairs says the act apparently did not occur, and the Rochester Police Department website says the investigation found no basis for that citizen's complaint. As I stated earlier, only 6 suspensions in 15 years have been given to police officers involving citizen complaints reported.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Pastor Wanda. I'm with Open Arms Christian Fellowship Ministries. I'm also a member of Rock Acts, and I'm also assisting with Enough is Enough. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. All right. Okay. Now, is that on? Excuse me. Is that flipping automatically?
No, I'll do it.
Oh, okay. So I'm starting with the sustained rates. Okay. So as you can see on the PowerPoint, the sustained rates in Rochester to New York. So the sustained rate is the percentage of cases where the officer is found to be guilty of the use of force alleged in the complaint. So out of 1,173 allegations, according to the professional standards section, over 13 years, between 2002 and 2015, and out of 923 allegations, according to the Civilian Review Board reports, over a 15-year period, the chief of police only upheld 2% of those allegations. That means 98%, right? What does that mean? 98%, right, was not sustained. So we got 2% that was sustained by the professional standards section. Between those periods, we have 3%, and the Civilian Review Board upheld 5%. Now, one of the review boards that we looked at was the Syracuse Citizen Review Board, and that was reorganized with a new ordinance in 2012. And what this is, the makeup of this board is that it is separate, it's independent department of the city. It is an 11-member board. It has a paid administrator and investigator. It conducts its own independent and separate investigations, and it has the power to issue subpoenas to compel witnesses, testimony, and also evidence. And as a result of that kind of setup and makeup, the average sustained rate over the last 4 years between 2013 and 2016, between 2013 and 2016, is a 26% sustained rate. So you can see the difference. Amen? You can see the difference in to have 11 members, to have the separateness, to be able to have independent, to be separate and independent away from the police department, to have those powers of investigation power and subpoena power. Big difference. Okay. Now, our current Rochester Civilian Review Board does not have that. It is not independent. It depends on the approval of the Rochester Police Department. It cannot investigate complaints. It relies on the professional standards sections for its investigation. It has no subpoena power. It cannot compel witnesses or evidence. It cannot administer discipline. Only the chief of police can do that. So, what happens as a result of the way that the Civilian Review Board is set up right now is you have a lack of discipline by the Rochester Police Department and a lack of transparency. So over the last 14 years, the PSS, or the Professional Standards Section annual reports studied related to civilian complaints of use of force by the police. Again, here are the statistics. Out of 1,173 allegations, only 23 were sustained by the chief of police. In only 14 of those instances did the chief of police discipline the officers, and out of those 14, only 6 of them ended up with suspensions. So, and as a result, also what happens now, complainants never learn what discipline, if any, was administered. So imagine making a complaint and there's no closure to your complaint. So lack of discipline and transparency result in a loss of trust in the Rochester Police Department and the government of the city of Rochester. Black and brown people needlessly brutalized, and in some cases imprisoned or killed. They experience physical and emotional trauma. There's a continued abuse of power by police officers, loss of their humanity, angry communities of color that do not believe in or want to cooperate with the city government. This is what happens as a result of a lack of discipline and transparency. And also what happens is there are lawsuits that cost the city millions of dollars in settlements and the time and effort of city employees. So the recommended ordinance that this Police Accountability Board is pushing for city council to pass is police accountability, city agency independent of the Rochester Police Department with paid civilian administrator and investigators, an 11-member board that would be appointed from the community council and the mayor. This board, we want to be able to be allowed to conduct independent investigations separate from the Rochester Police Department with full subpoena power, disciplinary authority that utilizes a predetermined disciplinary matrix in the event of non-concurrences with the chief of police. And that will be explained a little bit more after I'm done. And the ability to evaluate and assess Rochester Police Department policies and procedures and make recommendations for implementation. So this Police Accountability Board would have some teeth to it and some power. Amen? Amen. It would also have the ability to auditor and monitor the functions of the police department. And so what does that mean? It means that the PAB will review policies, procedures, patterns, and practices of the Rochester Police Department. It will have access to RPD officer record databases for this purpose only, but it will not make those records public for any reason, but at least it will have access. It's not just depending on an investigation that's done by PSS. It can actually have its own access to look at the records itself. And PAB will recommend changes to policies, procedures, and practices based on patterns of police misconduct. Amen? All right, that sounds like a board with power, right? All right, okay. So next is going to come Ted. And he's going to give us an overview of the Police Accountability Board and also talk about the matrix, the disciplinary matrix.
Thank you, Pastor Wanda. Sorry, gotta get this red bubble. So, you have a complaint. What do? You could go to PSS, who currently investigates the complaint, passes their investigation off to the Civilian Review Board. The Civilian Review Board reviews their investigation, can investigate itself, and then makes a recommendation to the chief. PSS makes a recommendation to the chief, and the chief can disregard both of those recommendations and make his own decision entirely. Right? Does that sound like a fair system, or does that sound like a really good command and control system over a process that the police do not want to lose any power over, right? So what we're proposing is a Police Accountability Board. So in our case, and what we're proposing, is that you have a complaint. You could go to PSS if you want, certainly within your realm. I don't know why you would. The data tells us that it's a waste of time. Or you go directly to the Police Accountability Board. You make your complaint. The board is a board of 11 civilians, as Pastor Wanda said, and there's a sort of an agency attached to that would have an independent investigative wing. So we take your complaint and they would investigate it, independently of the Rochester Police Department. These would be civilian investigators, not police investigators.
Right.
There are firms in your state that train civilians to become investigators. So they review your complaint, they investigate it, and then the investigator or the executive director goes to the board after the investigation is complete, and that investigation would include subpoena power. So they could get cell phone footage, they could get statements from witnesses and police officers, they could get body camera footage, they could get this. They would have a slew of evidentiary and statement, testimonial pieces of evidence at their disposal. So they get that information, and then they go to the board and they say, okay, here's a recommendation based on the investigation. And should the recommendation be, well, whatever the recommendation is, the board would vote to either go forward with the complaint or to decline it based on a lack of evidence. In the case that they go forward, basically 3 members of this 11-member board would sort of take all the investigation files and review it. At that point, each of those members would write up a statement about what they thought about the complaint and the investigation. So if all 3 of those members agree, great. Then what would happen is they would they would write out a report or a fact sheet of their findings of fact about the complaint, and they would determine discipline through what we're calling a disciplinary matrix. Barbara, can you? Yeah, okay. Thank you. A disciplinary matrix is a uniform, progressive, transparent schedule of sanctions for police officers who commit misconduct. Can you go ahead to one more? Yeah. So if you look over here, I think there's one of them like at the top of level 3, I think, is excessive use of force. I need new glasses, sorry.
Conviction or state confined felony.
Yes. Thank you, yeah, that's it, yep. So if an officer has already one sustained complaint, they would get an, was it 18 to 25 day suspension?
One complaint they get, if they have 0,
If they have 0, yeah.
18 to 25.
18 to 25, if the complaint is sustained, right?
I had a question, I just gotta ask it.
Yeah.
Suspension with or without pay?
That could be a recommendation of the.
We don't know.
They could recommend without pay, they could recommend without pay.
Depends on the contract, but we're going to have questions later.
All right.
And so that's 0. If they have 1, it becomes a reduction in rank, and then what does that say? I'm sorry.
Plus 5 days.
Plus 5 days. So 25 plus 5 day suspension, with or without pay. Oh, that's so much easier. And if they have 2 prior sustained complaints against them, it's automatic dismissal. Now this is our mock-up. This isn't like what is actually proposed. This is just an example of what could be, right? And this mock-up would be transparent. The whole community could get this. You could all get this. It would be on the city website, the police website. Everyone would know what the consequences are. One of the requirements of being a Rochester Police Department officer with our proposal is you have to agree to this disciplinary matrix, right? So there's no more playing favorites. There's no more, the chief doesn't have total discretion. This is in the hands of the community, and the board would be majority community members, right? Not city official appointees. Can you go back, Barbara? So, one more. Thank you. So at that point, this 3-person panel produces a report with findings of fact and these recommendations based on mitigating and circumstantial evidence or factors, and they make a recommendation for what the discipline should be. They then pass that recommendation and those findings of fact to the chief of police. At this point, the chief has input. The chief can say, yes, absolutely, I agree with the board 100%. I agree with your findings of fact. I agree with your disciplinary recommendations. I'm going to oppose them. We're done. The chief could also disagree, right? And at that point, when the chief disagrees, he is by law, by our law that we're proposing, required to write an extensive report outlining exactly why he disagrees. Currently, the chief of police has no responsibility to say anything about why he disagrees with the Civilian Review Board or the Professional Standards section, right? So you'd be required to do that. That would go to the board. The board could review the chief's rationale, and if it agreed with all of it, it could say, yeah, chief's right. Or maybe it agrees with some of it. Yeah, the chief makes a good point, we're gonna reduce the sanction. Or maybe the board says, nah, chief, that doesn't work for us. This guy's got 23 excessive force complaints behind him, he's gotta go. That's it, And why is there anybody on our police force with 23 excessive force complaints behind them? I don't know, but that's transparency for you. At that point, they send the letter back to the chief and say, we disagree with you, impose a discipline. The chief would then be bound by law to impose that discipline that the board recommends. This has been going on for over 50 years. The chief has lost the legitimacy to hold his officers accountable because he doesn't hold them accountable. He just doesn't do that. Sorry, getting a little feeling the moment here. At that point, that's it. The chief imposes a discipline or faces sanction by the judicial system. Maybe it's removed by the mayor, who knows. That's a bridge we haven't crossed yet, but that is in theory how this practice would work. When we originally drafted this, there was an appeal process, and the appeal process we drafted wasn't very fleshed out, and it was really cumbersome, so we removed it. But we wanted to do something else to sort of give that possibility to complainants. I said there were 3 members that would review a complaint out of this 11-member board. Those 3 members each have to write sort of a statement about how they feel about the case. Is it sustained, is it not sustained, and why? If one of those 3 panelists doesn't agree with the other 2, then the complainant is notified of that and can request that the board, the whole board, the 11-member board, review the whole case. And at that point, the whole board, the whole 11-member board would make the decision about that complaint, not that 3-member panel. So it gives the complainant a way to have more eyeballs looking at the complaint and looking at the investigation, and looking at the findings, and looking at the recommended discipline, rather than just 3 individuals if there's a disagreement and the nays overtake the yay. But that's something we wanted to offer to at least give some kind of recourse to the complainant. Let's see here. Oh, and I went over the disciplinary matrix. Sorry, I've got my papers here. All right, so let's, oh, thank you, yeah. Barbara and I've done this a lot, so she's really good. So this will not create community trust overnight. This has been a 50-plus year problem, but this could even the playing field somewhat. It puts the power back in the hands of the community, which over time, as the community uses that power, it could, in fact, better relations. Police would be held accountable, their acts would be have consequences, officers would be able to retain some modicum of their humanity, rather than being able to go out and beat and shoot people at random for no consequences whatsoever. And it would give, and over the long run, I think it would actually increase some a modicum of trust and the ability of people to, you know, I don't know. This is kind of speculative, certainly. But that trust isn't going to be created by a public relations campaign calling for police-community relations. It's not going to be created by, you know, the chief going down to the barber shop and talking to people. It's not going to be created by, you know, a report that looks at how we can improve police-community relations that actually offers no substantive solution. There are officers in the department that are tasked with going into specific neighborhoods and causing harm. That is institutional racism in the department. And we don't choose those goals. The chief of police, the mayor, the higher-ups choose those goals. Right? They're the ones that choose who to target and who to go after. And in the long run, by giving the community back some power, you may actually improve the relationships between the two. This could go toward increasing the reputation of the city. We wouldn't have so many terrible YouTube videos out there. Should be good for everybody. Good inadvertent, or, you know, indirectly for the police, but good also for the people that don't have to experience that kind of trauma. We also think this would lead to a decrease in lawsuits, and it could be seen as a national model. And we've had interest from around the state about this proposal, and actually from various sectors around the country too. So it's sort of a hybrid, and it does a lot of different things, but I think it has a lot of really interesting potential. And at this point, I think that's my last slide, correct? Yes. I would turn it over to Betty, who is going to continue with the PowerPoint this time. So thank you all.
The overview of the campaign for 2017. The case for an independent police accountability system report is published and released. The PAB, the Police Accountability Board Organizing Committee, presented the report to cover 100 religious, civic, and nonprofit organizations over the course of the year. Nearly 90 organizations officially support the report, and these endorsements are submitted to City Council. City Council contracts with the city for governmental research to review, for the Center for Governmental Research to review the current complaint process for addressing police misconduct. The CGR, I'm sorry, the PAB-OC, next slide, unless you want me to talk more about the CGR report, or is AJ gonna do that?
You want to say something about it? Say something about it. Go for it.
Right? The civilian review report was inaccurate, and a press conference was held
A month ago.
to call out the inaccuracies and to ask CGR if they would retract the misinformation. They refused to do so. But I'm going to let AJ talk more about the law, since that's his area. But in the meantime, the Police Accountability Board Organizing Committee revised and strengthened the proposed ordinance and sent it to City Council. The PAB-OC, or Police Accountability Board, from here on out it'll be PAB-OC. Developed bylaws for Police Accountability Board Alliance, which is now going to be PAB, to replace PAB-OC. The Alliance is comprised of organizations from Rochester and individuals who will nominate city residents and represent the community on the PAB. The 90 or so organizations that have supported this initiative, Barbara's going to tell you more about that, but they are going to be involved in selecting residents from Rochester to be on the Police Accountability Board. The CGR released this report and presented to the City Council. Enough is enough members were and are still in attendance.
And this was at that presentation.
At that presentation from the Civilian Review Board. I'm sorry, the Citizens Center for Government Research Board. Sorry, I didn't know I was going to do this part.
You're doing great.
Thank you. The overview of the campaign, Enough is Enough released a rebuttal to the CGR report, challenging their interpretation of state law, which AJ will tell you more about. Members of Enough is Enough, ROCAX, and UCLM met with council leaders to discuss the interpretation of the law. And then City Council requested an independent legal advice regarding disciplinary authority after the inaccuracies in the CGR report. Now, the overview of the campaign for 2018, Police Accountability Alliance holds its first community forum to report to the public and introduce members of the Alliance, which consists of a 45-member organization. The City Council will design its ordinance, and the Police Accountability Board Alliance hopes to be at the table to negotiate the final version. City Council will hold their own community forums, and we have yet to get dates. It was pushed back because of the CGR report and the discrepancies. And so hopefully we will be soon hearing about City Council forums. We want all of you to attend and bring a friend, a neighbor. We need more of our community members. We are power in numbers. City Council needs to see Rochester at its greatest. Council's plan is to pass the ordinance by June for adoption into the 2018-19 budget. Okay, I think that is all for me, right? And now Pastor Wanda.
Now, gathering and talking and clapping and laughing and having a good time over this subject, over this issue in our community is always great, but we need you and everybody else to do more. Amen? Amen. So we need you to take some action. By that, what do we mean? Well, on the screen it tells us we need action. We need people who will come out to the City Council meetings every third Tuesday at 6:30 at Rochester City Hall and sign up. You can even call ahead on that day to sign up to speak in support of the Police Accountability Board and in support of the ordinance being passed. Amen. So we need you to take action. All right, we also need for you, if you would, and if you feel obliged to do it, leave us your contact information so that we can stay in relationship with you. And when we need to call on you for some help and support, again, we can do it that way. We also need you to share and talk about this event and other events that are coming up so that people will come out and support the community forums that are going to be taking place, support the forums that we are also going to be holding in addition to the city council forums that are going to be coming up. We will make sure the date and time and that information is available to you as well. We are asking that people will join a group that is already working towards helping us to pass the PAB ordinance. And most importantly, we can never do this work without money. Amen? We got to keep it real, okay? And my faith tradition, it just says the love of money is the root of all evil. So we ain't claiming we loving it, but we need it, okay? So we will need your support in that way as well. So please, we are open to any monetary donations that you are willing to make towards this issue. Amen? Thank you so much. So let's be mindful. The clapping and the joy and everything we're experiencing, all the information, but that all has to go from the head to the heart to the hands, and that's action. All right.
All right, so as an attorney in Rochester, I feel obliged to share some good news, some bad news, and some uncertain news about police accountability. So first, for the good news, absolutely nothing in state law would prevent the Police Accountability Board from disciplining officers here in Rochester. So that is good news. So just as a brief overview, so there's Civil Service Law, Article 75, which outlines how public employees can be disciplined. That law explicitly allows for a, quote, officer or body to discipline any public employee. And so we think that a body such as the Police Accountability Board could fulfill that role here in Rochester. Okay. Now it's not all, as I said, there is some bad news here because some officials around the city of Rochester and others have spread this rumor that that state law would prevent discipline by the Police Accountability Board of officers. That's a misinterpretation of the law. So, for example, the CGR report that Betty referred to, they cited a different law, Civil Rights Law 50A. Now, 50A has nothing to do with who can discipline officers. What 50A says is that officer disciplinary records cannot be released to the public, so it prevents transparency. But there's an exception for any public agency, such as the Police Accountability Board. So just like the New York City Civilian Review Board, they can get access to officer disciplinary records. The Syracuse Review Board, they can get access to public disciplinary records. The Police Accountability Board in Rochester would be able to have access to public disciplinary records. But again, that law only refers to disciplinary records, not who can actually issue the discipline. If you actually look at the state law, the Civil Service Law, Article 75, that describes who can discipline officers, it says any, quote, officer or body. Again, as I've said, like the Police Accountability Board. So this misinterpretation, if you hear these rumors that state law somehow prevents officers from being disciplined by the Police Accountability Board, that person is either lying to you or they're misinformed. So you can go up, you can look up the law yourself, you can read it, you can read cases about it, as I've done, and you'll see that this interpretation of the law is correct. Now, for the uncertain news that I want to share with you tonight. We brought this to the attention of City Council. Originally, City Council went to their own attorney, to Corporation Counsel, the City of Rochester's attorney. They cited a case which had absolutely nothing to do with police misconduct whatsoever, to say that only the chief of police could discipline officers. Now, I've read that case. It's inapplicable here. It'd be a long story to explain it, but it's inapplicable. But based on our arguments that we made to them, we presented them with this information. They decided to go around their own attorney to seek an independent legal opinion from someone outside of the city government. So I think that's an important win for us in that we're getting them to look beyond this misinterpretation of the law. But it's by no means certain, and to date we do not know what the outcome of that independent legal opinion will be. So in addition, one thing that does stand in the way of discipline of officers is the current Locust Club contract. This is the police officers' collective bargaining agreement with the city. That spells out a certain disciplinary process that would have to be changed if we're ever going to get independent discipline of officers in Rochester. So what this means is, based on these two bits of uncertainty, we need your help immediately to persuade City Council, one, to fight the Locust Club to make sure discipline is part of secondly, on the off chance that whatever this independent legal opinion the city gets, if that for some strange reason says, the Police Accountability Board can't discipline officers, we're going to need to take action to tell them that their interpretation of the law is wrong. And so that's another thing that we're going to need from you, and that's why we're happy to have you here tonight and get your contact information so we can continue to fight for this important change here in Rochester. Now, one other thing that we're trying to do, we know, as I said, City Council is trying to get their own independent legal opinion. We don't want to just wait for them. We want to get our own independent legal opinion from someone with authority that can say, look, this is what state law says. So, as Pastor Wanda alluded to, these legal opinions are not free. That's why we're also requesting some funding from people in the community who care about this issue to help us raise the money. We're thinking for what we need some in-depth research and a memo from a qualified person, an attorney who has dealt with this issue before. This can be expensive, somewhere in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. That's the amount of money we're trying to raise right now to get an independent legal opinion to persuade City Council that discipline is not only possible here, but necessary. Okay, so with that, as I've said, we need your help. We need the help of the broad Rochester community, because for too long, there haven't been enough people sitting at the table to decide issues related to police accountability. We've had the chief of police, we've had maybe a few members of city government, the mayor, city council. What we need is people from the communities that are most heavily policed to be involved in this process. Right? We need the people who haven't had a voice for so long to get involved in this process. And that's why one of the designs that we're forming, and what Barbara will come up to talk about in a bit, is the Police Accountability Alliance. That would be a collection of community groups and individuals from the city who, in particular, the places from the city that have been most underrepresented in these accountability discussions for too long. So based on that, I will hand it over to Barbara, and she'll tell you more about how you can get involved in the Alliance, or if any of you are involved in any groups that want to be involved in the Alliance, we welcome you to join us. Thank you.
Okay, just so you know what's happening for the rest of the evening, I'm going to talk about the Alliance, and then we're going to do a question and answer period, which is why you have all those notes, so that you can write down what your questions are. And during the question and answer period, we're going to pass the hat.
Oh, we're doing it now.
Oh.
We got a hat starting already.
Okay, well, Chris, where are you?
That wasn't my hat, I don't know.
Pass your hat on this side.
All right.
So we're passing the hat to I'm going to have to just take your piece, Chris. Is that okay, or do you want to come up and say it?
Well, I would just add one thing.
Say it.
Sure.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris. I'm from the Rochester Democratic Socialists of America, or ROC DSA. Well, first of all, we're passing the hat also to pay our awesome interpreter that we had, a couple $100. They're heroes, so thanks for paying them. Great to have them. But also, like AJ eloquently said, there are legal fees involved, and a part of this is what these people try and do. They want to obfuscate and confuse us as to what we can do and how we can pursue justice. And we're not going to let them do that this time. We're going to collectivize, we're going to do this together, and we're going to pool our resources to win this, and hopefully to many victories beyond. So please give what you can, it's super important, and hopefully we see you guys all at City Council and any future actions. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Police Accountability Board Alliance, and then we're going to have question and answers, and then we're going to have a call to action. And we don't expect to keep you here too late, so just bear with us. We want you to hear the call to action. That's the most important part. And if you have not yet given us your contact information, please raise your hand so we can get the clipboards to you so we can have your contact information, because when it's time for the call to action, we need to be able to contact you so you can act. So the Police Accountability Board Alliance is, as AJ mentioned, going to be, if our ordinance is passed, we are asking for it to be an 11-member board, 4 of whom would be appointed by City Council, 1 of whom would be appointed by the mayor, and we are asking for 6 to be appointed by the community. And when we mentioned this to City Council, they had the question of, well, how are you going to, bring forward these names from the community? You have to have a mechanism for that. So we did. We created, we spent hours and hours creating a mechanism and writing bylaws for this alliance that we are now hoping we will have more and more organizations to be a part of. We do have 90 organizations that have endorsed the Police Accountability Board. This is a different entity. This is an alliance of people who will meet initially, probably often, maybe monthly or twice a month for the first 6 months maybe, to get acclimated to what we're doing. This is after the ordinance is passed. If the ordinance is passed the way we want it to be, and we want to go to City Council and say, look, we have this all set up, how we will elect people from the community, because as AJ mentioned, the biggest piece of this is that we don't have enough representation from the people who are affected directly by police brutality and police racial profiling. So rather than, having a bunch of, white liberals sitting around a table saying, oh, these people should do it, we want people from the communities of Rochester to represent. So the way we're doing this is that we first asked the organizations that endorsed the Police Accountability Board to be part of the alliance. And so you will have 1 or 2 members of your organization to be part of the alliance, which will be the group that chooses, by a nominating process, the individuals to serve on the board. The 6 represented from the community. So, and the Police Accountability Board in our ordinance would have to be residents of the city. Now the alliance, because there are many organizations and people who care about this issue who do not necessarily live in the city, the alliance, we're not requiring that it be members of or residents of the city, but they have to be organizations that will go out and work to bring in nominations for Police Accountability Board members who are residents of the city. So what I'm going to do is we have 37 organizations that have agreed to serve as members of the Police Accountability Board Alliance. And this is actually the first meeting of that group, even though we don't know who they all are. Hopefully some of them are here and they'll stand, but I know some people couldn't make it. So I'm going to read off these names of these groups and ask the people to stand if you're here representing that group. Now, if your organization doesn't get read off and you think that you are a good organization to be part of this, please let us know. This is not exclusionary, but we especially want it to be representing especially black and brown people who are the most affected by police brutality in Rochester. So the 19th Ward Community Association, let's not have applause, but just...
Sorry, white liberal.
We're not saying we don't want white liberals, we're saying... Okay. We're saying we want it to be... You got what I'm saying. This is a community effort. Okay, Action for a Better Community. Stand up. Stand up. Don't applaud, but at least let them stand up. Action Together Rochester. African American Health Association and Latino Health Association. Beechwood Neighborhood Association. Citizen Action. Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School. And Reverend Marvin McMickle, the president, is the one who signed on to this. So, yeah. Compeer. Dimitri House. Enough is enough. Jasenia, I think, is, and we have so many people. We're going to have a hard time choosing, but we know that Jasenia is going to join. Where am I? Facing Race, Embracing Equity. First Unitarian Church. First Universalist Church. Flying Squirrel Community Space. Rochester Community of Churches, the Green Party, Interfaith Gospel Tabernacle, Shirley is way back there, Metro Justice, National Lawyers Guild of Rochester, Northeast Area Development, Open Arms Christian Fellowship Ministry, right. Rochester Acts, Rochester Coalition for Police Reform, Rochester Democratic Socialists of America, Rock Citizen, all right, Shades of Sisterhood, Showing Up for Racial Justice, otherwise known as SURGE, Sisters of Mercy, Social Welfare Action Alliance, Spiritus Christi Anti-Racism Coalition, St. Joseph's House of Hospitality, Table 23, Teen Empowerment, United Christian Leadership Ministry. Your questions will be answered. Pastor Wanda is going to lead that, and she's going to be able to call on anybody she wants to answer any questions she wants.
Okay, first question. Why might police be in favor of the Police Accountability Board, and why don't we hear from them? AJ?
I don't know if I should do this.
Yeah, yes, the mic around.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
That mic works right there, AJ. Speak into it.
Okay, so I think the process we're proposing with the disciplinary matrix that Ted had mentioned is actually beneficial even for officers in Rochester, because it would provide a transparent, predictable model for how they're going to be punished. Where the way it is now, if they were to be accused of misconduct of any kind, the chief of police gets to play favoritism. Whatever. I'm sure you can hear me, hopefully. But, okay. So as I was saying, so the officers, the way it is now, the chief of police can play favorites, can discipline some officers but not others for the same exact sort of misconduct. So what we're proposing is a transparent, predictable, consistent model that would apply to all officers, regardless of, if the chief just happens to have a good relationship with that individual or not. So we think it's actually more fair for the officers involved. Further, if for whatever reason the officer thinks that it got short shrift, his issues were not taken, were not handled fairly, there's an appeal process that the officer, or for that matter, the complainant, or the person complaining of misconduct can take advantage of to say, look, I don't think this was fair, I want to appeal it up to the next level. And so there is an appeal process. So given the appeal process, given the transparency and the predictability of what we're proposing in terms of discipline, I think this actually is good, even for officers in Rochester.
Thank you. Betty, did you relinquish your post? I see you got coffee, but I have no questions. What's up with that? Just wait. Okay. All right. Let's raise your hand. Well, for the sake of time, though, can we kind of? Yeah.
No, you can read. Oh, okay. Here you go. Okay. My question is from a legal perspective. Based on the current contract with the City of Rochester Locust Club from 2013 to 2016, in that collective bargaining agreement, I looked at it, and it was more of the PSS piece. So will they need to actually vote in order for a change in discipline to occur within the police department? Is that
Like the Locust Club, was it?
Yes.
Locust Club, right?
Yes.
So did everyone hear the question? Just raise your hand if you did not hear the question. Okay. So the question had to do with the Locust Club contract, the collective bargaining agreement that's currently in place. And so there is provisions in that outlining the discipline process, and it says discipline has to go through the chief of police. So yes, that would need to be changed if we're going to institute the Police Accountability Board as we proposed it. Now, so one of the good news is the contract is currently being negotiated. It's currently up in the air, has not been finalized yet. So there's still time to put pressure on City Council and the Mayor's office to advocate for change to this system. So, but the change is not going to happen on its own. If we just let things be, the mayor's going to do whatever they want, and the system's not going to change. We're going to get the status quo for a long time. What we need is people to advocate for change, to demand that the mayor's office and City Council changes the current contract that's being negotiated.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if you have, how many people have questions written down so that we can get a variety of questions? Yeah, okay. So, we're getting quite a few about the law, so I want to make sure we get some other questions in here as well, okay?
Can you actually modify my question based on his response to her?
Can you just hold, you got a question, you wrote it down? Okay, you can modify it on a piece of paper, there you go. Thank you. Okay, so, I'm sorry. Let me finish, write it down, modify it, and then I'll answer. Are there any resources set aside for advocacy for helping people through the system?
Anyone want to take that one?
Anybody want to take that one? Are there any resources set aside for advocacy for helping people through the system?
Well, Enough is Enough does that. We work with people, we go to court with people, we'll take them to their lawyers to interview with their lawyers and help them advocate for themselves on, when the lawyers may kind of dismiss their concerns.
Just got to put it close to you.
So we do all kinds of, we'll give people rides, we'll go through the court system with you, we'll visit you in jail, we'll help your family deal with what they're dealing with. So we're hoping that Enough is Enough will be listed as the resource for people to go to. We can also help connect with lawyers. We know some civil rights lawyers in the area, so that if you get to your criminal case, you want to file a civil rights case, then we can help with that as well. So, and the contact information for Enough is up on the screen.
Sorry, can I chime in on that one? So the way the current system is, you have to go to the police department itself to make a complaint. So I think changing that and allowing people to go to civilians to make a complaint in and of itself is going to be making the process easier, because the Police Accountability Board, the goal of it is going to be to help people to make sure their complaints are taken seriously. Whereas the current system is discourages complaints. And as we've seen, the number of complaints have gone down over several years. And the sense of the community, people that we've spoken to, is that they just don't trust the current system. So we think having a trustworthy system in place with people who actually care about issues of misconduct, well, that in and of itself will help foster and make it easier for people to file complaints.
Okay, next question. Is the PABU, the Police Accountability Board, when it's passed by the council and the mayor, is it vulnerable to being disbanded as those officials change with new elections? And what protects it from political maneuvering? Who wants to grab the 8 or Ted?
All right. Okay, so a few things about this. So no law that's ever passed is ever immune to political change. So it's going to take constant political pressure on City Council and the Mayor's office if we want to see lasting change on any issue, including police accountability. That said, we've tried to put protections in place, in particular the Police Accountability Board Alliance that Barbara spoke to. That's designed to allow the community to select members onto the Police Accountability Board. So in that sense, it's removed from some of those political shenanigans that can go on. So there are some protections in place to prevent those sort of things. But ultimately, the responsibility is on the community and the City Council and the Mayor to make sure that there's pressure on all the individuals to make sure that they keep on top of this issue.
And I also would add that the Police Accountability Board Alliance will be a ready-made group, that if things start to fall apart, boom, you've got a group already of 50 organizations that can mobilize to make sure that this keeps happening. And the goal in the bylaws that we have is that the number of organizations in the Alliance never goes below 15. So part of the role of the executive committee of the Alliance will be to make sure that the Alliance stays strong, so that when there's a time to mobilize again in 10 years or whatever, there's a ready-made group to do that.
Okay, Omar and William, did you guys want to make a statement? You got something? I want to hear from our youth, okay? So I got your card. Did you guys want to say something? Okay, come on up. You can make your statement. That's what the card says. They want to make a statement. So Omar and William. Oh, okay. Okay, you got it. You want to stand out there so they can see you, or you want to get behind the pulpit, or how you want to do it?
I'll be right here.
All right, go ahead.
Is it on?
Put it right close to your mouth.
I want to make a statement that when police, when they get hired to have a job, it's not just for them to brutally beat people. It's for them to have respect and respect people in all ways. Not just respect them. And they also have to have authority. But it's wrong to just brutally beat people, and sometimes they may kill people, but that's just not right. They need to be nicer in every way because they're still people too, and you need to be, like some people say, treat people how you want to be treated.
Hi, my name's William. I might be young. I'm a 13-year-old seventh grader. But every time I wake up, I see the news and I see police brutality. And I don't think that's fair because of the experience that she had and he had. It was not fair. It was brutal. It wasn't really kind. They are misinterpreting the other African Americans to make them think as they're criminals. And I don't think that's right. No. So we, as people, we need to stand out and speak for all as one, because one voice is not going to be heard. We need all our voices and everybody who can care about to help police brutality, to come to an end. Now, I might not have much information based on the real world, but every time I see. When I woke up and I heard my aunt, she was scared and her kids, my cousins, and she was scared because the way that they treated her husband. And I was too, because that made me sad because the things that they did to my uncle that made me sad was that they broke his eye socket and badly fractured his ribs. And now, I think that if that's a brutal treatment, they should have they should have grabbed him and put him in the car instead of brutally beating him. And I don't think that's fair. So I think that we should all join together as one and make a difference in this world.
All right, now this is the generation we're fighting for. Amen. He can do it. What's your lifespan right now? 13, 14? If he can do it now, y'all, he don't put us to shame. We ought to be doing it. Amen? Come on now. All right, thank you. And then there was one more. I think it's important to honor our youth. It's important that they see us doing this. We're on the battlefield. We need to be the role models that they're seeing. We're instilling good principles, morals, and values in them. So I have one more card that is from the youth, right? Okay, come on up, because y'all the next generation. See, we might look young, but we getting kind of old. We need y'all to be on the field, amen? So I want you to tell us, what is it that you're asking? So you say,
what is the PAB going to do for us, like as our generation, and as we move on forward for the next generation and our future, as we go
on in life.
Okay. So what is PAB gonna do for him? Anybody want to take it?
You take it.
Oh, you want me to take it? Woo, well, what we want to do for the next generation is make it right. I believe that we have dropped the ball. We have to admit that we have dropped the ball as older adults and not staying on the battlefield and really fighting for the next generation. So what we want to do with the PAB is turn it around. We don't want to leave things the same way that they are. We don't want our communities to be disrupted, and we don't want, especially people of color, young men, people of color, to be afraid to be free in their own communities. So by enforcing a police accountability board, structuring this police accountability board, we want to see a better partnership with police and communities. We want to see a civilized relationship with that, so that you can feel free to walk to the store, so that you can feel free to drive your vehicle without having somebody rolling up behind you and checking your plate. So you can feel free to just hang out in your neighborhoods and shoot ball or whatever it is that you do. But this is really about having that liberation where you're not picked out because of the color of your skin and treated differently and then subjected to injustice, so that you're not scooped up out of your neighborhoods and put into prison cells or solitary confinement, or having your parents have to deal with trying to come up with excessive bail. Boy, I can go on and on and on. So look, we are doing this so that you can have life. I'm going to get my little scriptures in here, and have it more abundantly, so that you can be all that God has created you to be. That's what we fight for. This ain't about trying to have no status or who's the best at this. We fighting for y'all because we can only do so much. We need to, but y'all get the mantle next. Y'all next. Y'all the next generation. So remember that. When you look back in history and all these people in this room, and you remember you asked your question, what are we doing and what can this do for you? When you may be the chief of police one day, you remember. A group of people gathered over here in this church, and we said we was going to go into action for you. Yes. Amen? Amen? All right, I hope that helps. God bless you. Okay. Where's the mic?
There.
Go ahead.
I also had a comment. I had, while you were speaking, you inspired me, and I remember in school that it's not only the police that are being racist and are having racial profiling. And it's not only the black race that is being profiled, because there are children in high schools, just for being themselves, are being called school shooters or other things like that. Just because they are being themselves and being unique and independent, they're being viewed as harmful to schools. And thinking of the incident that happened in Florida recently, that's just not right. And I just really didn't like that. And I felt like I needed to say something about it because not many people are doing that.
I want to thank all of the youth for their courage tonight. Come on, we all give them a love and praise. See, these are our next legislators and leaders and officers. See, these are the kind of officers we want in our community. Come on here. Pastors, bishops, okay. Amen.
Can I chime in?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, another aspect of another way we can help the children is the Police Accountability Board, which we haven't focused so much on tonight, but it's important that everyone knows that the Police Accountability Board would have the power to evaluate systemic patterns and practices within the police department. So a lot of problems, they're not just about individual instances of misconduct or justice for individuals. That's important, but a lot of this stuff is systemic patterns and practices that spans across many spheres of life, including in the schools. So we have, say, officers in the schools trying to discipline children, when really that's better left to people like teachers and people who have some experience with, say, child psychology. This is not, officers do not have a place in the school in the way we're viewing it. And so the evaluators would be put in place to try to change some of those structures. That children are treated as children and not as criminals.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get your question. Do you want the back of this?
The back of
Just the back, okay. If the agreement is bad, how do we override it? And can council pass an ordinance or state law? So by agreement,
Collective bargaining.
okay, the collective bargaining unit,
It's
okay,
arbitration right now.
okay.
So if it does come out bad, how do we offset that?
So I think the real test, so the real issue is we want to make sure that when it's updated, it doesn't get to that point where they just keep the status quo. I think the real fight is now. So we want to get into that arbitration process and make sure that whoever's negotiating on behalf of the city knows how important discipline is to this process. And so that we need the mayor to put pressure on that person, we need city council to put pressure on that person, but they're not going to do that unless we do it to them, right? So look, if it were to come out bad for us and we got our ordinance passed anyways, then we have a complicated issue of two laws that contradict each other. What happens when that happens? I don't know. That's a complicated question that I don't want to have to, sorry. That's a complicated question I don't want to have to think about. So I think the best solution is to put pressure on them now, so that now that the contract's being negotiated, we get what we want in terms of the Police Accountability Board with the power to discipline.
But that for some reason, right, I just want to know what will be our contingency?
Let them strike. Let the police strike.
So, I mean, look, once again, so you can challenge it in court, you can try to put political pressure on them to try to renegotiate it, and but that's it, it's political pressure. It's going to be difficult, once they pass it, it's going to be difficult to go back to it. That's why it's important to put the pressure on them now before they renew this contract for another, who knows how many years. Right? So let's put pressure on them now.
City council tomorrow night.
Yeah, we're gonna, before you leave, do not leave until we have given our call to action. So if a bunch of you are thinking about leaving, don't leave yet. We gotta get through these questions and then we gotta have a call to action because it's gonna matter. Tomorrow night is a big night.
Okay. I think this one probably is for Ted. How were you able to gain access to the statistics about complaints, and is that data public? It's hard to imagine the RPD willingly providing this appalling history.
We did it together, so it was a joint effort.
So, so every year, Professional Standards Section and the Civilian Review Board are supposed to publish annual reports. And when we started looking at this process in 2014, those had not been published for who knows how long, at least 25 years. So we submitted a Freedom of Information Law request. As citizens of the state, we have the right to know what our government does and how they do it and what decisions they make and what resources they spend. And that's called a FOIL request, and every government agency has this. So we filed those requests and we were able to get from, it was 2001 to 2016 for the Professional Standards Section. And ironically, about a week after we submitted that request and got the actual files, the PDF files of all these annual reports, they miraculously appeared on the city website. So go figure, right? And then shortly thereafter, I believe the Civilian Review Board did the same and put their stuff up. Now, we foiled again to go back to 1992 when this law was passed to find out over 25 years how bad is it. And we found out that the city has retention requirements. And so everything before 2001 had been destroyed. Recently, as of this year, we found out, a group of us met with the Office of Business Intelligence, the data portion of the RPD. We met with one of their director. And he said that unless a complaint is sustained, after 5 years, all that data is destroyed in the RPD. So he said, you may have noticed on the slide that 929 I think it was for the CRV and almost 1,200 for the PSS, allegations of force. That's a huge discrepancy. That's like a 300 allegation discrepancy. Why is that? Because every use of force is supposed to be investigated by the Civilian Review Board. I can't go back and tell you why, because that information no longer exists. Wow. This is a huge problem. And when we talked to this guy in the Office of Business Intelligence, he said that he understands why we made the decisions we made based on the evidence we had, and wished we had done more. And our response to that was, well, you're not transparent. We can't do anything more. We have what you gave us, you know? And so the CRB data underneath it is more current stuff that is tracked better by the RPD. So that's how we got the information, right?
That's a much better answer than I would have given. But I do want to say that our report, if you want to, we don't have too many copies left, but if you want to read it, you can go to the website, and it's all there on the website, the report.
Excuse me, what website?
The Enough is Enough website. enoughisenough.rocus.org.
Enoughisenough.rocus.org.
We're so good. We're so good.
All right, thank you. Next question. What action has been or will be taken regarding the problem of 50A?
Excuse me, I revised it on the other side.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Can 50A be repealed, and how likely?
It absolutely can be repealed. It's a law. We put it in place, we can take it away. Well, we didn't put it in place, but, you know, somebody, some human being somewhere put it in place, so we can repeal it.
Just for a minute, how likely?
It is a state law.
Is that the one that, I'm sorry, is that the one that was quoted by CGR, the Center for Government Research,
Correct.
CGR, incorrectly used as support of what we're trying to do? Okay.
And there is a definite way that it can be repealed. There's a group in downstate New York that's already started working on this, and the ACLU and the NYCLU has started working on this. The problem is that the Assembly and the Senate, the one that is the more Republican, we need to turn Democrats so they'll pass it. So we need to get some more Democrats in the Assembly, because it's already been a bill that has been put into committee in the state legislature, but it's just sitting there.
Okay, does Articles, okay, there's a question. Did you pass your, did you?
No, I didn't know what where are those?
Well, let me get his, and then does Article 75 relate to public school K-12 teachers?
No.
No. Okay.
I think I'm not 100% sure on that, but it generally refers to public employees. So there is a system for disciplining teachers, though that obviously can be different than the police system. But our civil service law, Article 75, applies to any civil servant. So I believe it would still apply to teachers, though the way teachers are disciplined is not the same as the way officers are disciplined in Rochester. So there's some similarities and differences, but Article 75 itself applies to all civil employees.
Comment on the problem of unions versus community control and policing in K-12 education. Comment on problems of unions versus community control and policing in K-12 education. So is that like police in the schools when you say in relation to K-12, or elaborate on that one for us? Mary. It's Mary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question is that really what we're talking about is community control of the police force. There's also a major dialogue about community control of public education. There's a problem of unions that have aligned against communities. Unfortunately, it hurts me to say that because I am basically a pro-working class person. But that's the truth of the matter. So I'm just looking for a comment on similarities where community control our interests in improving public education for our community and improving policing for our community, where we can have strength for community control globally.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarity there. So that, just to rephrase, it was the comparison similarities between the community control of the public education and community control of police, whereby the community has the final say over these issues, not administrators, not heads of departments, etc. And yeah, I think there's a huge connectivity there. Community control is such an interesting term. In me, it elicits, from one perspective, it can be very threatening, and from another, it can be very empowering. And I think what we're talking about is something empowering element where, the needs of the people need to be met, and they're not being met right now by either system. And both systems have kind of run an inertia in some ways, and we need to have democratic control, community control of these systems by the people who are directly affected by them, not outside agitators, to use their term, or people that don't have connectivity to the communities which are most affected by those systems.
Okay, and this is going to be our final question so that we can move into the action piece. A provision in the Civil Rights Law prohibits disclosure of disciplinary actions taken against individual police officers. Are there any efforts underway to repeal that?
That's state law 58 that we had addressed previously. So yes, there is a movement to try to repeal the state law that prevents releasing officer disciplinary records to the public.
But the Police Accountability Board would have access, according to our ordinance, would have access to all those records. They would not be able to be made public, but as opposed to the way it works now, the Civilian Review Board doesn't get to see the past history of an officer and his or her conduct. In our system, the Police Accountability Board would have access to the entire database of the police force to see those records and be able to make judgments based on those records.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions. Let's give everybody a round of applause. And our next is going to be our action piece.
All right, everybody, thanks again for coming out. Just a little bit longer here, so bear with us. So a lot of what we've been speaking about tonight is we need people that act, we need people to come together. We talked a lot about the Locust Club. They are organized. They collectively come together. They get their collective bargaining agreement. So we need to be more organized. We need to come out and instead of being divided, we need to bring our power together to enact this change that we need. Just a side note, the Locust Club, they got their name in 1903. Their billy clubs used to be made out of locust wood. So they're the Locust Club, and have been chosen to change their name in 115 years, but just a little note. And again, this has been an ongoing movement for over 50 years, and this is the closest we've ever gotten to a true civilian-controlled oversight of police misconduct. So we really need you to do a few of these action items. If you haven't gotten this sheet, says action items on it, raise your hand, somebody will give it to you. See a few in the back. So hopefully everybody is signed up to get email alerts on upcoming actions. This includes if we don't get the discipline piece that we need the department to have any teeth or substance. Tomorrow, there's a Speak to Council session. This happens every month on the third Tuesday. Anyone can sign up to speak to council. You get 2 minutes to talk about literally anything you want. Hopefully you want to talk about the Police Accountability Board and what needs to be enacted in Rochester. And on this sheet, there's the number to call, or you can email. So tomorrow you would call before 5:30 or email before 2, but after tomorrow you can sign up to speak for the next month's Speak to Council anytime that month during business hours at City Hall. And you should come out to speak every single month so that they know this is something that people care enough about to keep coming out and demanding change. Like we mentioned before, City Council will be holding forums on Police Accountability Board. They're waiting until they get that independent legal opinion. So if you sign up for those alerts, we'll let you know when and where those forums are being held so you can come out, voice your support for this Police Accountability Board. So you'll be notified about that. If you or someone you know has been affected by police brutality or misconduct, or even just disrespect, which is part of, you can see in the matrix that was on that presentation, part of the policing culture is disrespecting citizens, either name calling or just making you feel unwelcome in the place that you already live. So if you or anyone you know has experienced any range of those issues, you can contact Ted. His email is on the action item sheet. It would be good for the movement to have more examples to point to why we need a police accountability board. If you are part of an organization that would want to be part of the Alliance, you can also contact Ted. The more organizations we have, the more that City Council is going to take the ordinance with some weight, show that there is community support behind it. And lastly, if you'd like to donate it all for the Legal Opinion Fund or for any of our ASL interpreters at this or other forums, there's a link right on the action item sheet. So let's come together and make this happen.
I just want to say, if you want to come to council tomorrow night and just say, hello, my name is Barbara Laffer-Ware, I'm with Enough is Enough, and I want you to pass the Police Accountability Board. That's all you have to say. And if everybody comes and does that, and we won't take, you won't need 2 minutes, more people can speak. So if you just want to do that, don't use my name, use your name and your organization. You can just get up and say that, and that'll leave more room for more people to speak. Okay, thank you.
A couple of things before I thank you all for coming. There was a question about, the first question was how do police feel about this? I personally spoke to a police officer that said he was in favor of the Police Accountability Board because it would make his job safer. Those police officers who are committing abuse in our neighborhoods are generally the same set of police officers. With the Police Accountability Board being able to hold those police officers accountable and possibly get them out, that makes it easier for police to do their job, which is to serve and protect the community. Second of all, to my white liberal friends, sometimes the downtrodden have been downtrodden so long that they won't come out of fear. But when they see other people stand up for them, that gives them hope and that gives them courage. So please keep coming. Bring your friends. Black, white, red, yellow, and green. We're all in this together. Thank you all for coming out. We hope we can do it at Forum from this day forward. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.